Welcome to episode 131 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week, we play Hades. Let's get right into it.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have three friends with me. The first friend, you know him, you love him. His name is Michael Ruffalo.
I'm excited to talk about a very good game.
Here to talk about a very good game with us is our friend, the Chief Guns Officer of the Left Behind Game Club, Mo Murtati.
This might be the best game I've ever played or the worst game I've ever played.
Wow.
Whoa. Somewhere in the middle. And for the third time, back once again on the show, it is Flora Eloise. Welcome back to the show.
Welcome. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Of course. So you can find Flora on our episodes previously of Last Day of June, as well as A Short Hike. But for those folks who don't know you, go ahead and tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I run a website called Epilogue Gaming. We kind of focus on video games as art, literature, and a storytelling medium. We've been kind of running that for a couple years now, and I mostly focus on writing. So.
And you were streaming, but the one thing I would absolutely recommend everyone do, I think you have impeccable taste in gaming. So if folks want to follow you on Twitter, you post all the games you're playing, and typically there is some really fun games in there that you wouldn't find otherwise. So from a curation standpoint, your Twitter is fantastic. Where can folks find you on Twitter?
I'm at Ludo Narrative FM, and that thread has been really fun to kind of keep up with. I started it because I stopped streaming, and I wanted a way to kind of like visualize all the games I've been playing, and it's been fun keeping up with it.
Absolutely phenomenal. Michael, I think you wanted to run Flora through the gauntlet of questions.
Gauntlet time.
Go ahead.
Just for the listeners that don't know, we usually do this with our guests before we hop online to, kind of loosen everyone up, get a little bit more comfortable with it. But we think letting you in on the behind-the-scenes magic will take this to the next level. So, Flora, I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
Don't be too intimidated. They're going to come at you flying fast. Just give us the best answer that you have. The gauntlet begins! So what's a really popular game that everyone seems to love but you don't like?
Currently, I would say anything Metroidvania. So Metroid Dread comes to mind. It just came out. I just don't enjoy environmental exploration, the difficulty, all of that sort of stuff.
Okay, great. Answer. If you had to marry the last video game character you played, who would it be?
Well, technically, it would have to be Zagreus, the subject of Hades, because I just logged on to check my stats and everything. But prior to that, I would say maybe Yagami from Lost Judgment.
Okay. We do have a Yakuza channel in the Discord for all of you Yakuza fans. Have you ever had a crush on a video game character, and if so, who?
Tifa Lockhart, yes.
That's a good answer.
Easiest answer so far.
Okay. Another one. If you had to play a game against your worst enemy and you had to choose which controller they use, which one would you give them?
I think I would give them a Guitar Hero controller.
Oh.
They have just enough to be dangerous as far as inputs, but very frustrating also at the same time.
You just play Rainbow Six and using that as a controller. Could you imagine?
No.
Okay, the last question that I'll ask you is, have you ever wanted to live in a world from a video game, and if so, which one and why?
Oh, goodness. I guess it depends. I feel like, off the top of my head, for some reason, Cyberpunk 2077 just came to my mind, even though it's depicted as this dystopian, hellish landscape where, all of these corporations are just grinding people into the dust, but there's something really compelling about it at the same time, and it's obviously quite visually beautiful, so...
Very good. Very good.
As long as we aren't T-posing our way through the entire world, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, you'd walk around on your commute to work and get a few giggles in with all the bugs and glitches, so you'd be fine.
Amazing. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you for the questions. Those were great.
This is not a show about Cyberpunk 2077, although one day we may do that. This is a show about Hades, developed by Supergiant Games, published by Supergiant Games, available on Windows, Mac OS, Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, as well as Xbox Series X and S, originally released on September 17th, 2020. We're going to run into a segment we call the Fast Pitch, which is a one-sentence description of the game that we are about to talk about. Who wants to describe this game succinctly first?
I will go first. It is a narrative-driven roguelike. That's it. That's what it is. Beat that.
All right.
That's very tough.
Oh, I'm gonna go next then. It is a slashy slash featuring the stars of Disney's Hercules.
Oh, good. Florida, do you want to go next?
Sure, I prepared one. So I would say Hades is a family dysfunction simulator where everyone is hot, there is an achievement for petting a red three-headed dog, and pomegranates are well represented.
Yo.
That was very good. Mike was succinct, Flora was flawless, and I'm just going to come in and say it's a roguelike based in Greek mythology where everybody's sexy.
I mean, do you really expect the Greek gods to not have some real spice behind their appearance?
The stuff.
Yes, they have a lot of intercourse with a lot of people throughout the mythology, I don't think it was,
He goes there. Let's jump into the time capsule. This is a segment where we just run through and talk about the things that were happening around the release of this game. So games that were released around this, other games made by the same dev, etc., etc. Set the stage. What games came out around the same time as this one, Mike?
So I think if we remember, just to set the stage a little bit, this game was released during the Game Awards as an early access, and you can follow along on a Noclip documentary that goes behind the scenes. But this was very odd not what I was expecting for this game, because Pyre had just come out the year before, and they were basically developing this game in public from the get-go. And other games in this vein that had come out around this time, Dead Cells came out in 2017. This was the winter that we were getting Smash Brothers Ultimate, so other things were in the air. I think I was really locked up in Mutant Year Zero when this game came out. That's what I was spending a lot of time on. My turn-based XCOM in a post-apocalyptic future where you play a giant duck.
And Mike, you know the history here really well. They had one of the first Epic Game Store early access deals, right?
I think you're right. Again, if you watch that Noclip documentary, which I think we will link in the description, very good, and it shows a ton of the behind the scenes stuff where they were freaking out that the website that the trailer pointed to was not live when the trailer started. They had to wait. They were furiously working behind the scenes over the course of the 90-second trailer to get that 404 resolved.
Wow.
Not only that, but I remember Amir, who is one of the designers of the game, was freaking out because the Epic Game Store page went live an hour before it was supposed to premiere at the Game Awards. So they freaked out thinking that their whole thing was going to leak. Nothing on the front page, but if you typed in Hades into Epic Game Store, there it was for you to try. I feel that really deeply.
You've been similar places.
Yes, I have.
The other thing that I would add, and I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I feel like roguelikes today are way more commonplace as a genre. But back then, I don't know if they felt as common. I think there was Binding of Isaac. I think there was, Dead Cells had just come out. There were some others for sure, but just not nearly as prevalent as I think they are today, where, that generative style randomized game is becoming more popular.
Yeah, and I think it also was perceived as a niche game style, if that makes sense. You'll never see it be played by the average person, whereas now I feel like you said, Mike, the Steam has picked up. I would never have played it. I would never even looked at it. It would have been too small of a game for me to even play 5 years ago.
I think if I remember correctly, when we floated this past you, Mo, you were not interested.
Most likely. Yeah, my origin story with Hades was very, really awesome. Let's just say that.
I think there were a couple of games that we twisted your arm and said, Mo, there are a lot of weapons in here that you're gonna like.
And they even like shoved in a sympathy gun for me just to make sure I played it, kind of thing.
Now, I guess I have a question for everyone, and I'd love to start with Flora on it. What is your history with Supergiant Games? Have you played all their titles? We've played Bastion on this show, but I want to know, have you played their other games?
I have a bad habit of purchasing discounted games and never playing them, so that unfortunately applies to all of the above: Bastion, Transistor, Pyre. I was kind of cheer pressured into trying Transistor, but I haven't actually gone past the install stage yet. But eventually I plan to get there. Hades was my first exposure directly to playing one of their games.
At least you can feel better knowing that you don't buy multiple copies of the game and not play it. Like some
It's
other
happened.
people.
Michael's
Who would
going
do
in.
that? Who would do that? I don't
Yeah,
think I know
who
a
would
single
really
person.
do that, right? Like, what kind
I
of
may have
crazy
played
person?
Hades on 2 different platforms, but we'll get there. I've played all of Supergiant games except for Transistor. Pyre is a like mythological basketball game, if you will. Bastion is just like an RPG, like a top-down RPG. And Transistor is very similar, but has a more of a, instead of a real-time vibe, it has a little bit more of a like stop and start kind of combat. I've not played Transistor, maybe will one day. But Mike, is your kind of lineage the same?
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching Building the Bastion on Giant Bomb when they had just, they said we were developing this game. I played Bastion on launch. I loved it. I did not play Transistor or Pyre as much as I thought they looked really interesting, and I've wanted to. They're in my backlog. And it's interesting playing this game because it seems like the natural progression in one way or another. It looks a lot like Transistor with an ancient Greek aesthetic, and it plays similar to Bastion. So it's interesting. It feels like the next step for Supergiant Games.
To be honest, these weren't games on my radar. The only one that I kind of have experience with was Smash Bros. But this was also like when it originally came out. It was during my like lull in like video games where I didn't really play much of what was like going on. It was basically just games I had like lying around, like the Call of Duty or the Maddens. Kind of like once in a while, I wasn't playing a lot of games, and that's why these ones being like niche, kind of like I was saying, slipped past me.
Is anyone here like a big roguelike person? Because I would say I am like medium with the genre. I enjoy games like, obviously I love Rogue Legacy. I love Dicey Dungeon, which came out last year. Highly recommend that one if you haven't played it. Nuclear Throne, Enter the Gungeon. I think that's basically all of them I've played. So I would say I'm like a medium fan.
I would say Hades is actually the only real like roguelike that I've actually fallen in love with. I've dabbled with a few that you just named, but this was the first one that really hooked me, and I think it was just because of the sort of the art style and the writing. Just the way that this game kind of presents itself is really strong.
I'm blanking on the what's that game that we played that you're in the spaceship and you go through space?
FTL.
FTL. I don't know how I totally forgot the name of that. But FTL is, I think, one of the first roguelikes I played. And by no means can I say I'm big into roguelikes, but I think pretty unanimously I like every single roguelike I've touched. Like, I enjoy, you guys know this about me. I enjoy games that can be hard and that you need to overcome, and not by, the game getting easier, but by you being more skilled and, more aware of what's coming at you.
So now that we've kind of set that up, talked about the game a little bit, talked about our love of roguelikes, I'd love to know before we jump into this game, how'd you play this? I'll start and say that I played it both on Switch, did about 50 runs on the Switch, and then did another 50 runs on Xbox Series X when it came out on Xbox Game Pass. Mike, how did you play this one?
I played it entirely on my Xbox through Game Pass, and it was a joy.
Flora?
I played probably my first 50 or 60 hours on Steam on my PC, and then I took a little tiny vacation after getting the vaccine, and ended up double dipping on the Switch as well, just because it has the cross-save function. That was really, I think, a boon for me to just know that I wouldn't have to start over from scratch. So I've
Mo's
probably played a
smirking 'cause
collective. Sorry?
You made a Hades joke, and Mo was smirking because of it.
I tried to bury it in the lead there.
Yeah, no, totally.
PC controller or mouse and keyboard?
Controller predominantly. Ever since I got my DualSense hooked up to it, it's been kind of a no-brainer. That's my favorite controller currently.
And how's a cloud save work on it?
I don't actually remember. It's a very simple setup. When you first boot up the game, there's like an option in the menu where you can say, hey, link it with this other thing, and then every time you finish a run, I think it saves and crosses over.
Very easy. Mo, how'd you play?
Me, totally on the Switch, and it was the Switch that made me continue playing it, because I was almost forced to continue like trying it out on a same thing as Flora. It was on a trip. I was kind of forced into playing. Didn't have anything really to play. Hades was loaded up. I just beat Breath of the Wild, and I had nothing else. And then I started doing a few runs, and I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I continue playing this? It was being on a mobile device. I think that's what kind of made me stick to it, and that's how I played it throughout.
So let me set up what Hades is all about. It is a dungeon crawler. It's a roguelike, and you go through multiple runs where you are trying to make your way out of the underworld to the real world. You play as Zagreus. He is the son of Hades. You find out more about him and his story, and I don't think I'm going to get into that, but you have a choice between different weapons, different boons. Mike just made a face. You're going to learn some things. You're going to learn some things. And each run, you try and make your way through rooms that are populated with enemies, and you face a boss at the end of each world, and that's it. I've beaten this game a total of drumroll 21 times.
Jeez.
So let's jump right in.
You are hardcore.
Yeah,
Holy
you know
cow.
me. Hardcore
okay.
Harry.
Are we doing spoilers? I think we should.
Yeah, I think that
Yes.
we will spoil everything except the very, very late game, because I don't think anyone here has like gone to the epilogue, but we will spoil most things. So if you want to play Hades and find out the story, you should probably pause this, play the game, come back to it when you're in a good place.
And
Fair
also,
warning.
as far as that spoiler warning goes, kind of like pause the podcast now and come back later. Hades is a game that it's not exactly clear when you finished it, and there's more after the credits as well. So as much of a time sink as it may seem, I would recommend maybe getting to the credits. Like, there's so much story here.
Mm-hmm. So I need to ask. So I set it up and said that I've beaten this game 21 times. How many times have y'all cleared this video game?
Twice.
Mo?
I've finished 6 times.
6 times.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I've with 5 different weapons, I believe. No, yeah, five weapons.
Flora's excited.
I think.
How many?
I think I'm in the 30s.
Whoa!
So I will double check that figure, but I'm pretty sure it's like 36 or something.
Okay, so we know how many times we cleared it, but I think it's important for us to set up how much we know about Greek mythology before we get into this.
Totally.
I'm assuming that a few of us, and I probably know who, Flora and Mike, are huge fans of Greek mythology. Is that fair to say?
You first, Flora.
Somewhat. I was always interested in it when I was younger. I remember reading various mythological texts for fun and stuff, but I don't have like an encyclopedic knowledge of who everyone is and how they all interrelate and what their backstories are. And I kind of like how Hades doesn't assume that you have that knowledge.
It is great that it doesn't assume you have that knowledge, because I think so, like, you know, maybe not a surprise to many of you, I was a giant fan of like Greek and Roman mythology and, you know, ancient Egyptian mythology when I was a kid. I was a little weirdo reading the ancient Greek text. And I would like nerd out on that stuff. I thought it was the best, but it has been so long since I had like read any of those things that I came into this super rusty, and this game, like, talking about the different characters, meeting them, hearing how they interrelate was like just breaking all the rust off, like the gears. It was amazing to feel all of that stuff come back to life.
Yeah, I had the same experience, Mike. I'm like, every time a new god was discovered, I'm like, remember this guy? And then they'll have like an interaction. Specifically, the one I'm talking about is like Poseidon and Zeus. So brothers. Zeus is head honcho essentially. And there was like one moment when I was unlocking a boon for Poseidon, and he's like, "Oh, hey Zagreus, you know it's your strongest, most powerful." And all of a sudden you hear like a cough, and it's like, "Oh, what did you say?" And it's Zeus popping in. He's like, "Oh brother, I didn't see you. I'm sorry." You know. And I got like a duo boon because of that, of their little banter. I loved every minute of it because it was so organic too. Like,
Can I say something that's potentially very stupid? I thought that Supergiant Games created Zagreus for this game, not realizing that Zagreus is an actual character in Greek mythology.
Oh.
Okay, Mike's giving me a nod. That seems like a fair one.
That's totally fair. Zagreus is like
Okay.
a non-character, like
Yeah,
in
okay.
I
ancient
would
Greek
agree.
mythology. Like
Okay.
there is a myth that he is involved with, which is like, you know, what all these characters are based on, but not a major character by any means, not even a minor character, frankly.
And just to go a little further, there's other characters that I don't think necessarily are always kind of belonging in the same stories when they're natively told in the original text. Like Chaos is a character in this game where you don't necessarily hear Chaos and Poseidon bantering when you learn about these things at a young age, I would suggest.
Absolutely. Just fun little thing. So knowing that all of the gods are a god of something, and Zagreus, the son of two gods, has to be a god. What do you think Zagreus is the god of? Does anyone know?
I'm gonna say
Being sexy.
I'm gonna say he's the counter character to Loki, and he's like the god of mischief because he seems like he's snarky and he's always like jabbing at everyone.
So that's Hermes, and that's what I wish some of Hermes' boons would have been. Hermes is like the Loki character. Go ahead, Flora.
I don't know if are you asking this as a hypothetical, or are you about to drop the knowledge hammer on
I'm going to
us?
drop the knowledge hammer.
Okay, because the game tells you at some point you're
Oh,
the
do
god
they?
of blood. Yes.
Okay, so
I don't know if that matches the mythology itself, but
Kinda, right? Because one of my favorite things in this game, and it's a stupid thing. It's so dumb, but like Zagreus has these conversations with different characters where they're like, "What are you the god of? Like, you have to be the god of something. Like, maybe you're the god of blood. You know, you bleed unlike all of the other gods. There's no ichor, etc., etc." Zagreus is the god of rebirth.
Oh.
Gotcha.
Right?
Really?
Yes. Is that not perfect?
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
for the game
It's for
structure, that
rogue,
makes
too.
more sense.
Yes. Is that not perfect?
Dude, some software engineer was in like some like Greek mythology like course, and he's like, "Oh my god, I can make a rogue game. The character's perfect for it."
It is so perfect at every point in the story that they tell, which we're gonna spoil, but like I'm just gonna drop a little bits. Like when you find out that you died as a baby and were reborn, and you're like, "What? Like what? How? What? Is that like a trick or something?" They're like, no, that is literally what you're the god of, dying and being brought back.
Yeah. Well, they thought he was a stillbirth, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
I can just picture Greg Kasavin, who's the director of this game, just running through his studio being like, "Guys, I figured out what our next game is about. He resurrects himself.
Yeah.
It's a roguelike."
We don't have to pay royalties to anyone. This is like century.
The truth bombs you only get on the Left Behind Game Club, so stick around for this. Gameplay. It is a hack and slash dungeon crawler that feels very good to play. I don't know about y'all, but it's like the perfect combination of like dashing, weapons, powers, boons. It feels sublime to play.
I would say it can feel sublime to play.
Okay.
I think that there are some weapons that are just frustrating on all accounts to use. And I think you can really pick the wrong boons and set yourself up for a really bad time. But yeah, generally if you like play it in a smart way, it can feel really, really good.
Which weapons do you find to be more frustrating? Because I think that kind of mileage may vary under my conversations with other people.
I'm sure everyone has different preferences, but I found the bow and arrow to be very frustrating.
No, that's my favorite weapon.
Well, you're better at this game than
That
I
might
am.
be Jacob. I think that's like the meta weapon. Like that's
It is. I was looking
Okay.
this up. I was looking at the different aspects, and like all of the bow and arrow like aspects were really high up, but all of the weapons that I like to use were like what I felt was OP was like the gun, the gun,
The
and
adamant
the shield,
rail.
the adamant rail, and the shield, and the pitchfork, like
The Eternal Spear.
the eternal spear. Those were the ones that I felt were like the strongest, easiest to use, easiest to play with. Just adapted to my play style, no matter how I wanted to play, whether it was up close or further away. But I did not find that was the case with with some of the others.
I think an underserved weapon in this analysis here is the shield, which is my go-to. That's like my comfort food. It looks like Mo's comfort food as well. It provides a nice balance of like up close for the dashing that Jacob mentioned, and also allows me to keep my distance in certain annoying rooms, because as the game progresses, the enemies change their variations, and some of them have like multiple armor sets depending on the sort of difficulty modifiers you add to the game, and it just becomes a nuisance sometimes. And what I prefer to do is to throw on one of the god boons. I think it's called Doom, where it's from Ares, where it basically just takes extra damage after like a 2-second waiting period. Basically just get behind some cover, run around, spam that, get some damage down. Like that sort of thing really allows me to feel dynamic. And it took me a long time to start using the cast in this game. For whatever reason, I would get so caught up in just hitting with your normal attack and using your special, which for the shield is throwing it, that I kept forgetting that I had another sort of projectile the whole time. So
I'm just so happy seeing Mo clap. Like you just like spoke to his soul when you said that. I couldn't agree more. I felt like the shield was so OP. Like you could just hold the shield up and it would guard against any damage coming directly at you. I was like, how do you beat a weapon like this that it not only defends for you but also attacks very, very well?
Yeah, totally. That was one of the like major features of the shield was you're always safe essentially. If something's going on, you can always back up and hold your shield out. I found with the bow, though, that one was the easiest one for me to kind of get wins, primarily because the build route I went with was a lot of like Athena blocking with the volley. So when you're throwing the volley, you're pretty much creating a wall of nothing hitting you and deflecting back. And if you get that multiplier where like deflect does more damage, or you add like a jolt to your arrows, and eventually there's like a Daedalus hammer upgrade where you can send like 9 shots with your special. Like, it becomes almost like you just stay behind a wall, launch a couple volleys, get the multipliers going, and you're laughing.
I made a tier list of the weapons in my mind, and I would love to share this with y'all.
Absolutely.
Yes. S tier, bow.
Wow.
A tier, fists, rail. B tier, so I said S tier. Yeah, B tier is the shield, and then F tier is the blade and the spear. They both can go and never come
wow,
back.
this is so cool. Okay,
yeah.
So when I
you are
started
better than me at this.
Yeah. So
For once, I'm good at a video game.
This game I played a lot, like I said, when I was traveling a bit, and I had a good buddy of mine, shout out Zach, we were playing this together with, and he had unique like play routes just like you guys are saying now. So like you're saying the spear is useless. That was like one of my favorite ones to use because it was like if you get the backstab multiplier going,
yes,
and you spam it, like there was so many cool modifications, and it's so awesome here. Like someone's like, "This is terrible." Mike's like, "The shield," or like the bow is terrible. I'm like, "What?" And vice versa. You guys are saying the same back at me, so it's cool.
What I loved about the spear was it felt like a sniper. It felt like I could throw it a long distance, get some type of boon modifier of like, oh, it's going to electrocute everyone around them. And by the time I pulled it back, it was like in a lot of cases 1 or 2 attacks, and it would not only clear a lot of people around it, but it would also like kill people at a distance. I didn't even have to like get within harm's range.
Yeah, and it's also interesting, like, it's such a trite way to observe video games and say, oh, there's player choice, you get to choose how you want to engage with this experience. But, like, with Hades, it's actually true and doesn't feel hollow to say that. And also reflective of that truth is part of, like, it sounds like not only are we aligning with different preferences regarding the weapons, but their boons as well. Like, I emphasized Ares, I've heard a few others emphasized. Like, it's just kind of, there's so many different directions you can take this game.
And
Yeah.
what are boons for the uninitiated before Mo jumps in?
So boons are kind of just little modifiers for your weapon. You start off with none of these boons, but over time you make choices between doors, and you can unlock things like adding lightning or adding splash damage or adding the whatever the heck, the like the Artemis chasing arrows. There's so many different kinds, and over time they stack on top of each other. Some of them can level up when you get these pomegranates and etc.
No, totally. And
I
like
how
one
you
of the
said
ones.
splash damage.
I couldn't think of what it was called. It's the Poseidon one, the rupture damage. That's what
Yeah,
it is. It looks like a
totally.
splat. So.
No, I love it. Nick, one of the ones I don't think I've heard anyone mention was, I think it's the god Dionysus or the wine
Dionysus.
god. Yeah, that one it's like slowly becoming my favorite like path to like ramp up, because like the passive ability comparable to like Jolt and like Doom is it does continuous damage. It doesn't delay your weight and then like a hit. it's always doing damage. So especially if you have like the shield, or if you're throwing the spear and you have like a chain effect of some kind, you enter a room, you just send that out, all the small NPCs are done, and you can just focus on the big guys. That's what I found. Having Dionysus there to do continuous passive damage to the room, it was literally invaluable.
I looked after the fact that some of the boons I always used, and Dionysus's strong drink.
I mean, I'm not
Dionysus.
Greek, but Dionysus.
Dionysus's strong drink was one of my favorites. So beyond the passive stuff, you also get additional health restoration from all the fountains that you use, which makes sense because he enjoys a good drink, that lad.
So I was a huge stan for the Zeus boons. I thought they were like, and this hurt me in a way because Poseidon's my like favorite of the Olympic pantheon. But I almost always went for Zeus whenever it was an option, because lightning strike, the boon where whenever you attack someone it does chain lightning. If you are using the adamant rail and you get the Hephaestus perk that changes the fire from like auto shot, never have to auto shot, never have to reload, you can basically just jump around and shoot lightning at people out of your gun. It is amazing, and it just kills groups of people so very quickly.
Did you get the auto tracking upgrade for it by any chance?
No.
So there's one thing you can get where you literally, especially like in the final fight with Hades, there's pillars you can hide behind. In most fights, there's pillars. There's one situation where he was sending his like volley of like constant death beam at me. I was standing behind a pillar, firing my machine gun, and he was auto tracking, adding lightning bolts to him. Like the modifiers in this game are so cool, and they changed the way you play just the normal weapons that they stopped even becoming that.
Is that Artemis that gives you that?
It might be, because I was going through like an Artemis phase, I think.
Okay.
For the arrow.
Artemis has the tracking arrows. She's like the green little arrow symbol when you pick up her boons. One of the things that reminded me of is my favorite cast, which it comes from Demeter, and she has it's a laser ice beam that if you upgrade it will track your enemy's movement, and so do like just lengthy damage, and you can upgrade not only how long it tracks and whether it tracks, but how much damage it's doing while that whole tracking action happens. So whenever I can find that one, that's a go-to for me.
I like that one as well. I have to say my favorite cast, or I'm not sure if it takes the place of the cast, but it's once your cast shards or whatever are out of your inventory and like around the map.
Oh yeah.
They shoot lightning down, because again, I'm a big Zeus stan. It shoots lightning down, and that's how I beat Hades the first time. I just ran away and that's how I beat the Bull of Minos and like everyone, right? You know, I just shot the cast shards and then ran away from them very, very well, while all of the lightning just chipped away at them. Same thing with the Hydra. It's just so OP.
Totally, and I had something similar with Zeus, because I feel like Zeus is a great modifier, but when you get the Dionysus Festive Fog, that does a ton of splash damage initially and then creates that little area. And then there's an upgrade where you take like 15% less damage if you're in there, but you can also modify it with Zeus to add lightning in the cloud. And if you have Jolt on it as well, that's how I beat Hades the first time. It was Dionysus and a Zeus build with the shield, essentially, just leaving him in the fog of lightning. It was nuts. It's awesome.
Y'all haven't even mentioned like Ares' blade rifts that you can just throw out like a blade rift that slowly causes damage, and if there's a large group of enemies, you can do tons of damage to a lot of like low level minions. But that's, I think, one of the strategies I use to beat Hades a lot is just as he's staying in one place, you throw a blade rift, and it almost has like a pinball effect to a certain degree too, and it'll bounce off columns and stuff and just cause more damage. It's chaos.
And there's also the God Calls, which we haven't mentioned yet, where you basically build up a meter, and over time you're able to summon the gods to help you in combat. And there's actually a cheeky little achievement. I haven't gotten it yet, but it's where you summon the gods' help against themselves. And so that's something I need to go back and work on.
So those are my favorite rooms. So contextually, you know, whenever you complete a dungeon or a little area, it gives you options of where you want to go next. And it's often this god or that god, or do you want to get money, or do you want to go to buy something, or, you know, where do you ultimately want to go? And some of them have two gods or two boons in it. and you need to decide which boon you want out of the two. And the one that you spurn, the god that you do not choose, is just hurt and then comes after you. They send not only a bunch of enemies, but like a personification of them, or their spirit coming after you. And once you defeat them, you then get that other one. But I did that completely by accident. I was using Aphrodite's call against her, and I rarely use the call. That's one of the areas that I know I have the most improvement on.
That's the charm, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Useless.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Unless you're fighting her, those hearts are annoying.
Yeah,
totally. And I think it does, like, if you get a 5 like socket, like full max like power of the charm, I think it does a good chunk of damage on like a boss if you're at them.
You got to eat a lot of pomegranates to get there.
Well,
I love the ways that they weaved just like ancient Greek mythology through this game. Like, and they do it so well. Like the whole concept being you're fighting your way out of hell through the different layers to get to your mother, or to find your mother, is just so interesting. And they respect all of the different pieces of lore throughout. Like, Achilles is not supposed to be in the house of Hades, but he makes a pact so that way he can come down there for a bit, so his lover can stay above.
Because he is not a god. He is like a Greek
he's a hero,
warrior, right?
Yeah,
he's a hero. Got it. Not even a demigod like some others, right?
No.
Oh, so you're just adding layers in here. The Zagreus thing is gonna live with me forever.
Well, I think if I remember correctly, Achilles was dipped in. Yeah, there you go. Mo, why don't you tell it?
oh, I don't know much. Literally, he was dipped by his like ankles, and like because his ankles weren't dipped in like the infinite life juice. Essentially, when someone fought him, they're like, "Yo, take this to behind your heel, which we don't have a name yet for. Die, you."
Yes.
And then there was like some guy, like a doctor, who's like, "We'll call that the Achilles heel from now on."
I want Mo to give me the recap of every ancient
moment in
Greek
history.
mythological story. He got dipped in the ancient life juice.
Mo, describe Homer's Odyssey to me, please.
He went to go get a donut one day and didn't come back. He got lost for 40 years.
What's wrong with him? He didn't know his phone number.
Keepsakes, which are an item you get to select and take through levels. I used Scully's tooth so much. Did y'all do the same thing?
Yeah, Skelly's teeth, the lucky tooth, is actually my most used. Like, there's a precipitous drop-off on this graph of other keepsakes that I've used, but I also have used Ares' blood-filled vial and the palm blossom, which levels up your boons randomly every few rooms. Those are probably my go-tos.
No, totally. I think I didn't use the tooth that often. I had a flow. When I entered a run, I chose Athena's because I wanted to get the deflect dash most of the time. And then like after the first boss, I would see if I got something like worth it, and if not, I would switch to my like focused god. So it would be like Zeus or Dionysus or whoever it might be. And at the very end, pre-Hades, I'd put the tooth on as like an insurance policy.
You guys use the tooth over Eurydice's take no damage for 4 attacks or 5 attacks or whatever it is.
Yeah,
gotcha. I did. Yeah, because I didn't have to worry. I don't know. It was just kind of like last source of like I might get an extra defiance or whatever. Stubborn defiance.
I think I first maxed out Charon's ability without realizing it, and then once I clued into what those boons or what those little trinkets that they give you are, I then leveled up Scully's and used that a ton. Oh. And then when I realized, I need to like be conscious about which boons I'm taking, not just walking into random doors and rooms, I then started like going after Zeus and then Poseidon and then Ares and just worked my way through all of the gods that I liked.
Yeah, and I feel like there's like a bunch of tips that like people might not even know. Like one thing I learned early on was like the Daedalus hammer, the upgrade that modifies your weapon. Yep. So like one thing I didn't know for like a long time when I was trying to struggle to even like win was like that you get that every time. Like you don't choose another option. Whatever like route is there, essentially do that one because it's always some nasty, super powered like ability upgrade. So that's one thing. If no one knows that, do that. Do not skip it under no circumstances.
Hephaestus is low key the best god.
Lucky Tooth. Old Spike Collar, and then there's a huge drop off of me using everything else. And Moa, I hard agree with you, and that's something I didn't when I played it on Switch and I did about 50 runs. That's like probably my biggest mistake is not going after weapon upgrades. And I swiftly corrected that when I started playing on an Xbox, because I think it took me literally 30 to 35 times to beat the game for the first time on Switch, and I beat the game for the first time on like my 16th run, which was a marked difference for someone who is bad at video games.
You're very good at this, though.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of the game's difficulty and whether or not people are good at it or not, I wanted to ask if anyone here ended up turning on God mode, which is the difficulty modifier in Hades.
Absolutely did not. No.
Is that the very end where you can select different modifiers for your next run, or is this something else?
This is something that's just native in the game settings. So the way that God mode works is every time you die, you get a slight damage increase. I think it's either 2 or 4% damage. So it actually gets easier to play the game the longer you have God mode on and the more times you die. It's a very gradual and sort of subtle difficulty modifier, but it's something that I was advised to turn on once you have beaten the game, had credits roll, and then you're starting to chase achievements. That's usually a way to kind of make it a less friction endurance sort of based experience.
Cool.
Yeah, the thing that you're bringing up, Bo, is like the heat gameplay mechanic, which once you've beaten the game for the first time, you can then add difficulty modifiers to say, great, I want to beat it with enemies having like a shield where one hit and then I can start going after their health. Or the mini bosses, which we haven't even talked about, will have an extra attack technique that you wouldn't see in the normal game. I beat the game on 8 heat at the top end.
Wow.
But you could take the game up to, I think I tried it at 15 or 16 once, because at the end of the game you get specific statues if you beat it at, I think, 8 heat, 15 heat, and then I don't even know, lots of heat. Flora, did you beat it with a high level of heat?
No, the highest level of heat that I have on here is 4, which makes sense because I rarely turned it on ahead of time. But once I started trying to beat the game with all the weapons and stuff, I started wanting to kind of farm for resources. And if you beat the game with no heat and you go back to replay it, the rewards that you get from each mini boss are diminished. So you initially get a diamond or Titan blood, which are like very important on the totem pole of currency in this game. And suddenly that becomes like you get this currency of darkness, which is like these more permanent passive upgrades. And because I was looking specifically for a few materials, I started adding heat, and that's about as much as I've done as heat 4. Probably with the shield.
You guys are way
honestly,
more
I
hardcore
think
than
that
me.
Yeah, I think for me I have an 8 clear, and then everything else is 3 and below. So I'm with you. It really cranks the difficulty on the game for sure.
I've not been able to beat Hades with 1 heat yet, so
really?
Yeah, and it's super weird. Like when I completed my first run, I used the fists, those claws that they give you, and that's not my preferred weapon by any means. And I've only ever been able to beat the game with weapons that are not my like favorites to play with.
Interesting.
It's such a weird thing.
When I was trying to get a win for each weapon, I had that same moment where like I was using the fists, which I would never really use. And I'm like, this is a bad build. What is going on? And then I clear the third like major boss, and then I get to Hades. I'm like, okay, sure. Like this game has a way of like it might be a bad build, but you might just discover a new way to play.
Yeah, I definitely found that like it really depended on what boons I had picked, and how lucky I got getting Athena. Because as much as Athena is not my favorite, god or boon to take, it is so necessary, I found, to like stand a real chance against Hades at the end, because the ability to deflect or the ability to be invulnerable or to reduce damage, like just huge, especially the deflection.
Yeah, for me it was like Side Hustle was my number 1 boon, which just gives you extra money every time you go through, and then Divine Dash, which is that like shield that goes around you when you dash, was my number 2, and those were essential to me. Bosses, mini bosses. I loved the mini bosses in this game. They were also different, also distinct. And did y'all have a favorite?
Yeah, let's set them up, right? We first, as you're escaping the House of Hades, you go through different layers of hell, and the first mini boss that you encounter are the different Furies. So it's either Megara, Tisiphone, or who's the third?
Electo.
Electo, exactly. And it's random which one you get. At the beginning, when you first start playing the game, it's always Megara. But as the others are introduced, you start fighting them each at random. They all fight in a very similar pattern and a very similar take with slight variations on them. And then, I don't know, did you guys have any preference between them? Which ones you liked fighting the most?
In terms of like easiness, I wanted Megara every single time. But then like I started having fun with Electa because I would just use like the traps to pretty much take her down. But Tisiphone, it was a loose cannon. Sometimes if you didn't have it deflect, it was a little bit of a bad time.
Yeah, and I think it's Tisiphone that is the one that like corners you in an increasingly small space, and so the chances of you avoiding damage is diminished quite a bit. And that one I tend to dread a little bit. But I think it's Electo who sends out those like circular spikes, and those also seemingly get me often. So yeah, Meg is kind of the easy one once you get used to her. She doesn't have any unpredictable patterns.
That's exactly how I felt. Jacob?
Same, hard same. Yeah, and it adds another layer because in the story, Mike, check me here, but her and Zagreus are like ex-lovers, right? So then there's that added layer of complication between them.
That's what I've come to understand watching videos about this game. But I did not realize that as I was playing, although I did pick up on some, let's just call it tension between him and Meg. You know, like there was definitely some tension in the air. So yeah, I just preferred her because it was the fight that I did the most and the one that, you know, just like any game, when you face a boss 100 times, you just learn all of the patterns and how to dodge and how to get where you need to be and when to get out of the way and how to best, you know, get as the most amount of damage in without getting hurt. So that's ultimately why I preferred her.
And while we're on the subject of Meg and like the potential relationship there, I don't know if any of you went through the process of like romancing any of the characters, but there's a number of romanceable characters, let's say, where you gift them nectar and they first give you back a one of those keepsakes that we mentioned. And then over time, it feels like it took me 30 hours to get through this. You can romance both Meg and Thanatos, who you encounter as like a sort of sporadic mini-boss. And there might be someone else, I'm not even sure, but I know for a fact because I've unlocked both of those stories.
I did not. So I obviously gave, because there's two levels of, there's nectar, and then there's the item that is...
I think it's Ambrosia?
It is.
Yes, you're right, Ambrosia. So you basically give... 6 to 8 different nectars or the same nectar to a character, and then you can give the ambrosia to the character to unlock, I guess, their final story, whatever. I didn't do any of the romanceable paths, but I think I got to the end of, I think, Scully, and then maybe one of the two other gods where you get to unlock a little icon next to one of their keepsakes. To say like, hey, you got to the end, you have a great relationship with these folks, but didn't romance anyone, and I should have.
I got a question about that because I'm still kind of like, I'm still going to be playing this game. Mm-hmm. So do you just give them the nectars continuously? Because I just keep getting the heart plus ones, and I just keep feeding it to them. That's not like an endless pit, right? Like I'm eventually going to get something. Okay. All right. I'm just dumping these like nectars at these people, and they're like, all right, thanks, see you later. I feel like I'm just throwing like money in a tip jar.
Yeah, it felt like it took forever because there's so many characters, and like first I wanted to collect all the keepsakes, and so I was spreading my nectar thin. In that, well, that sounds strange, but over time I I decided to have a more dedicated, deliberate approach, which ties back to that same thing about heat. When you add heat, you get better rewards, and so I was able to advance them more quickly.
See, I felt like I don't know where I'm at in the game, I have a ton of the nectar, I have a ton of the ambrosia, and I just have no one to give it to because I want that immediate gift when I give it to them. You know,
well,
I've not romanced anyone.
One thing I learned like today, Mike, if you need like Titan's blood, you can sell your ambrosia to the dealer guy, and he gives you Titan's blood.
So I've seen that in the the dealer, the trader, whatever his name is. But I've always felt like, oh man, I have never used this ambrosia once, and I will kick myself so hard if I find out that like this is necessary for some like OP upgrade to unlock the third aspect of any of these weapons or something.
Totally. I'm using it to unlock an aspect, I think. But mostly, too, I kind of know the weapons I like now. I've played with all of them. So, like, if I have to waste it on, like, a specific weapon, I'm like, this is the one I like. So I'm just going to keep doing it. 'Cause I don't think I'm putting this game down for a little while.
Yeah, it's a great
I think
game
as I
to
went
pick up.
through, I think as I went through, I was like trading for what I needed in the moment. So if I needed Titan Blood, I would get rid of Ambrosia, or if I needed some extra darkness to be able to unlock, because we haven't even talked about that, how there's different powers or different buffs that you can essentially give yourself between runs in Zagreus's room mirror that can give you Death Defiance, for example, which gives you an extra life, gives you extra health, gives you money when you start. And that's truly the way that you, if you are a bad video game player like me, how you eventually end up winning is you just build up your Death Defiance so that when you make a terrible mistake, you can live at least through one of them.
So you mean once you get past Megara and then you get to the next boss, which is the Hydra, that's when you need that?
Yeah, exactly. That Bone Hydra is, let me tell you, when you first start, that thing's scary.
It really
but
is.
I think by the time I got, because it almost looks like a marionette head in the way it's animated because of the way that it moves. But that ended up being my favorite boss, just because it had such a fun, predictable formula that would be like, cool, I'm going to hit him, I'm going to hit his minions, I'm going to hit him, hit his minions. That's it. I'm done.
It's like if Onyx had a baby with Charizard.
Okay, yeah, fair. I felt like that was the boss that I could speedrun. Like,
same.
That was the boss, and I felt like by the, I don't know, maybe 10 runs in, I was like, this is not a challenge at all. I'm not going to take a lot of damage. I'm going to get through this. I know exactly how to get through this as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and not only is that ultimately a very speed runnable boss, but then you gradually unlock his name, which I think is kind of funny. I don't know if you've seen that yet. We've said Bone Hydra, but his name is Lerny, which is just a good name.
I don't know when
how
it
do you
happened.
unlock that?
Yeah, I don't know when it happened.
The path.
But it
you do?
does, and then no, I don't remember when it happened. It just happened once, and then now his name is Lerny, and I don't know what I did to do that. But no matter what, so I missed the joke. But
You've just spent enough time hanging out with him that now you're good friends.
yeah,
Right?
No, literally, it's a throwaway piece of dialogue that Zagreus is like, "Hey, we've seen each other a lot. Like, can I give you a nickname? I'm gonna call you Lerny." Like, I think that's literally it.
Wow.
Like, it's a
Right.
fun
Okay.
throwaway line, and
And
it's great.
the best thing about it too, Mike, is like when you defeat it, it doesn't say like Hydra defeated. It says like Lerny defeated. Like so it changes the name as you go. Yeah. I love that boss fight. Like whenever I got to that now, it's like I'm gonna have fun now. Let's go spank his buddies, and then let's go take him down like the different stages. Definitely speedrun.
My least favorite boss is the next one in Elysium. And actually, I only really ate half of this. But the two bosses are
Theseus?
the Theseus and Asterius. Asterius being a minotaur.
The Bull of Minos.
The Bull of Minos, I'm fine with it. Theseus is my least favorite boss in this entire game.
Why?
Very tough, really flighty, and puts like a shield up at a lot of times, and actually imbues himself with a power of one of the gods at one point, which can be really punishing if you're not ready for it.
One of my favorite moments is when him and Zagreus have a like fight. Like they're not literally fighting, but they're talking back and forth about how the gods are on their side. And he's like, "Wait, the gods are on my side too." Like, isn't it weird that they're on both of our sides? Can't they make up their mind? I was like, this is it. Like, this is ancient Greece, you know?
I love the dialogue in this game so much in every moment.
Yeah, and I think that one of the reasons I totally agree with like which one is more difficult in this boss fight. Part of the reason I feel that way is that you get to fight Asterius and a mini boss like a separate, isolated encounter, so you get to kind of practice his moves and stuff. It's the combination of having to pay attention to both, and as you mentioned, like he puts up the stubborn shield and things like that. But also while we're kind of living in this boss space, there's a little tiny shade who's on your side in the audience, which like there's just these tiny, speaking of the dialogue, little nuggets that he basically just, Zagreus says hello to this little shade every time if you run up to him after the battle. And he's always there cheering for you with a little banister and everything.
I can't wait to see him.
I was hoping so hard that the more that you completed this game, the more that the shades would start rooting for you over any of the heroes in there. I thought that would have been like an amazing, sign of your progression. But sadly, I did not make it that far to see if that happens. But yes, I noticed that little shade, and I was like, this is the best. Because they hang little banners over the railing, and some of it's the bull, and some of it's Theseus. And then there's this one little, like, Zagreus banner. And I'm like, oh, my man.
Did you guys, you can fight the Minotaur earlier and, like, kind of reduce the boss fight. I liked that, like, that was there specifically because it was like my practice, like, warm up. And if I was able to clear him out, and I'm like, I know the gauge, I know I don't need any more like boons, I can fight right now if I have to. It was like my boss gauge.
Mm-hmm.
I also like Theseus is supposed to be a hero, you know, like a king, just a super accomplished hero. And they definitely give him the confidence of a hero, but he just comes across way more of like a douchebag. You know,
what if
just
Hercules was a douche?
Yeah, like he really comes across like a douche. And it's just, that's not how I wanted to see him portrayed, you know?
Is he portrayed differently in other media that you take in about Greek mythology?
No, but that's just not what I think. That's not how I imagine Theseus in my head, you know?
Yeah. And Jacob, you mentioned the shield earlier with him. He blocks a lot of things. This is when I like the throws a lot, especially like if you had the cast lightning or you're throwing the shield or the spear. You throw it on a wall, it bounces and it's hitting him in the back with backstab damage, and even if he has a shield up, he's toast. That was like I liked that boss fight. It was the hardest one I felt. It was almost harder than the final.
You know,
Hades wasn't harder?
I felt like I spent more time grinding Theseus and I can't remember the name, but the bull and the hero.
Minos, Asterius.
I took a long time to clear that, and then once I cleared it, the small rooms leading up to Hades were nothing, and then like getting to him, I just had to learn his pattern, and now the game's like unlocked.
They also make the bull way too nice and family friendly. Like that bull is supposed to eat like virgins and drink their blood. You know, he was raised in the dark. You know, like is the most savage beast they could think of.
Yeah, I feel the same way with Fenris Wolf in like the Norse mythology, where like it's like the wolf, and everyone's like, oh, it's just a wolf. It's like no, that's the destroyer of the world. He eats the sun, he eats the moon. Like that's not like a friend. Like
Also, shouldn't he be like naked as well? Like that to me is what the bull of Minotaur should be naked.
Right.
I'm doing it again.
Okay.
Thinking about those.
So you guys, that third boss battle is the one that sticks out in your mind. The one that sticks out in my mind is one that you might not even have to face, and that is the King Vermin.
Tiny vermin, yes.
Yeah.
That's the same.
When you get to the next level, you're about to bang on the gates of Hades, and Cerberus is guarding the door. And to get past Cerberus, there are all of these little tunnels that you have to go through, and some of them might have the bag of meat that you can use to lure Cerberus away, and some of them don't. And you never know which one it's going to be. And if you get unlucky, you end up having to face this tiny little rat that is like the king of all rats. That's just like super OP. It can teleport. It hits for a ton. It is clearly a joke, but it is the one that I hated the most.
Yeah, and the key thing here is that after you get that little Cerberus snack, then all of these rooms become optional and kind of a weight of, okay, do I need more boons or do I need more resources? Or if you have one of the kind of permanent perks that I use where your health is restored every time you enter a new room, sometimes that's a nice quick way to heal up. I find that I clear all of them every time without thinking about it. It becomes part of my routine that I kind of want all of those extra resources. And luckily, Tiny Vermin is not guaranteed. There are a couple similarly annoying bosses, but for some reason, Tiny Vermin just packs a punch. And it's strange, like why I choose to engage in these optional tunnels, because they have poison enemies, which end up being, in my opinion, the most annoying part of enemy encounters, is where involuntarily someone spits a little venom dart at you, and all of a sudden you have to recalculate where in the room the nearest little healing fountain is to stop the poison, and it's a weird series of tunnels.
Breaks your flow so hard when you get
much.
poisoned like that.
Totally.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
And the fact that they're optional, the way I decided essentially was like I had to have two things. One, I had to have an upgrade. I want to say it was Aphrodite maybe, where like anytime you drank from a fountain, it would give you full health back. There was that option, or it would give you like an extra X% multiplier on it. The other thing, there was a keepsake that you can get where you can level it up to the point where there's like a 6% chance that 10 health will drop from vases around each chamber. And that got to the point where almost every chamber I was getting 1, sometimes 2, like 10 block health. So if I had that, I'm like, okay, those optional chambers, I might be at 50%. I kind of want to fight a little bit better against Hades. I'll take that risk of like, let me farm some health in this optional chamber and then get out of there. But if I don't have any of those, I'm not going in specifically because of that poison.
Before we talk about Hades, can I bring up like who I think the most annoying boss of this entire game was?
Sure.
And Mike and Mo, you might not even know this, but you can fight Charon.
Oh man,
yeah.
is that? Wow. How?
There's
So Mo knows it, but essentially, like when you're shopping, so Charon, boatman of the River Styx, he has a bag of money behind him when you're in one of his shop chambers, and you go up to it and you say, "Borrow 300 gold," and when you do that, he gets mad at you and takes you into a boss battle where you have to beat him.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and it's very tough because you can actually get it very early in the game when you are not equipped to take him on at all. I've only ever beaten him one time. He has like a lightsaber style attack that literally covers a quarter of the room, and if you beat him, you get a loyalty card that gets you a discount on all of his wares.
What? Just for that run or
Yeah.
forever?
Forever, for the entire
Get
game.
outta
Forever.
here.
Yeah.
Jacob, I've walked past that little bundle of money so many times. I'm like, no, I don't need it. No, I don't need it. No, I don't need it. And now I'm gonna try it just for that because there's an achievement in the book too. Like if you beat him 3 times or something, you get like some crazy 5 diamonds or something.
It is very tough. I don't know, Flora, did you fight Charon at all?
I did, because I guess I'm greedy, and just it totally took me by surprise. And I was like, free money, cool. And then I ended up beating him first try, but I came out of there with very low health, and I don't think I actually cleared that whole run.
Yeah, so there you go. I tell you guys,
Wow.
when you play this game some more, make sure you take him on.
I'll
at
take a
least
shot.
once.
Yeah,
It's good to know.
Did you guys fish at all?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
I'm
I had a cool
upset
thing.
with how many times I screwed up the fishing game because it's not
Yeah.
hard.
It's like Pokemon. There's like the fake
really
little
is.
shimmy, or like it psychs
Yeah.
you
A bite.
out. Yeah, ooh, and then you got to get it, or you're not gonna get it.
So okay, let's talk about Hades. So you finally get past Cerberus. You start walking out onto the snow, and you find Hades there waiting for you. And there's
Badass.
like amazing. Like it is such a good moment. It's also like not the portrayal of Hades that I was expecting. Like he seems way more like just angry than he does like, moody. Like Hades is supposed to be just sad and moody a lot. And this Hades is just like angry the whole time. He's like, nothing's ever good enough. Not only for me, but for you. But he basically sits there and he talks to you, there's this back and forth, this dialogue. And when I think once you beat him a couple times, you sit down and reflect that like, oh, he's up there waiting for you while he's just getting damaged, waiting for you to get there. And then he still puts you through a freaking ringer of a fight. And it's a multi-stage fight. I felt so ripped off the first time I fought him because I completely cleared his health. And then he says, psych, I'm coming back.
I felt so proud of myself when I had a text message ready to send to my buddy when I first cleared his health the one time, saying like, I beat. Never mind. And I didn't send it because I realized he comes back stronger than ever.
I posted to the Discord the moment that he came back and just wiped the floor with me after he goes like super aggro, and I was like, I just died to Hades. Like when I thought I had him, and yeah, just such a moment that feels like a real gut punch the first time it happens. But it really does make you respect how hardcore he is.
I think there's a couple things. It's like when he rips off the cape, like it's a true like Star Wars moment. Like I picture him as
wrestling.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. Also a wrestling thing, truly a wrestling thing. Logan Cunningham, who voiced Hades. Sorry, who voiced Hades. He voiced the narrator in Bastion, and he's kind of been involved from a voice direction perspective in all of Supergiant's games. He's got such a deep baritone, and he's so perfect for Hades. And Mike, the area where I disagree with you is I think he was actually quite moody, and like he would fly off the handle really quickly, and you would understand like as you keep playing the game that there are reasons why he is the way he is, he acts the way he is, and it's just because he doesn't want to let you in completely. He's like a 13-year-old boy who's just pouting because you wouldn't let him watch wrestling on Saturday morning. I don't know why I went there, but yeah, I think he was quite moody, and I feel like Logan Cunningham's performance really sold it for me.
I like the design. It's just not what I was expecting. I'm not expecting Hades to be a burly lumberjack. I'm expecting Hades to be slender and powerful more than he is like, raw force.
You want James Woods is what you want.
Yeah. You know what? Maybe it's because I grew up with James Wood being like Hades, Maybe that's what it is. So yeah, I don't know if we want to get into the fight of Hades too much, but you end up clearing him for the first time. He attacks you with the spear. It's especially fun when you bring the spear to the final battle, and he says like, "Oh, I recognize that. Like that's the weapon that I used to fight, against my parents, against the Titans." But the battle with Hades just gets super super difficult, or at least really goes to the next level when he just starts shooting beams like a wagon wheel out of him. And one of the things that I realized is if you hug him in that battle, if you get nice and close, you don't take damage.
Oh.
You can hide behind pillars, or you can get very, very close to him, and the damage doesn't get you.
Is this a trap?
I'm
Is this
not
Mike? Are
even
you
kidding.
baiting right now?
Try it. Try it.
He's like, die next time, psych.
On
No,
your
I didn't
first
know that.
try
I'm gonna
at
go back
fighting
and try.
Hades, stay really close to him.
Yeah. I was watching a YouTube video. I saw it, and I tried it, and it worked.
Cool.
And I was like, this is amazing.
I wonder if that's a speedrun strategy or something, because the convenience of the pillars, they're so wide in their breadth, they're pretty forgiving as far as how much wiggle room you have to get behind them before the beams really come out. So I would imagine that probably came from speedrunners, and assuming any of you follow like speedrunning of any sort, this game has a pretty active community, and like there's like all sorts of really interesting runs, like a fresh file save run and stuff like that, where you start like literally from the get-go at the menu instead of over time like all of us have done, building up all of your perks and keepsakes and such. There's a huge diverse set of like who speedruns this game and what sort of runs they do. So I've seen a lot of really interesting tech come out of that community.
Just on this time perspective, have y'all looked at the fastest time that you've cleared Hades? Because my fastest clear was 25 minutes and 20 seconds.
Wow.
That's spicy. That's a very good run. Mine was like 33.
I've got a 29:18 sitting in front of me. I don't know if there's anything quicker than that.
I have 26:56.
Ooh, that's a spicy run too.
Yeah.
But I would say most of my runs are longer than that.
And just to clarify, those times are calculated in-game where there are durational pauses on that time. I've found, given just how many hours that I've clocked in on Steam and such, that it's almost exactly an hour for me to complete a run with Hades if I factor in the returning to the House of Hades at the end of a run and, allocating my resources, making a weapon change, anything like that. So it's back to that idea that this is a perfect Switch game. I think that this is a wonderful single sitting. Just do a quick Hades run, leave it installed for indefinitely, and I found myself coming back to it for that very reason.
So knowing that, I've played Hades for 105 hours. How long have you played Hades for?
68 on Steam and some untold amount on the Switch. I don't think that those numbers correlate because Steam is logging it separately. But
So
you've played more
probably
than me.
around the same.
I think you've played a little more
You're
than
in
me.
the ballpark. Mike, how long have you played, and are you gonna keep playing?
Yeah, I'm just looking at my profile now. It says 55 hours or more on the Switch, and I've only
wow.
played it there. Yeah.
I don't know how much time I have in there. I think I've done about 40 runs. They've probably been about 30 minutes each, somewhere around there. So, you could say about 20 hours, maybe a little bit less. I will continue to keep playing it, but I don't know if it'll be my go-to game when I need to do a run or something. I'm enjoying continuing to make some progress at it, but I think there are other games that we might talk about in the future that I enjoy playing a little bit more.
I would love to jump into a couple questions here that actually came in through the Epilogue Gaming Discord, if y'all are game.
Let's do it. Let's hop in.
Here is the first question that I'm going to bring in. Were there any parts of the writing that you didn't particularly like? And if so, how would you have preferred to see those parts handled better? I'm going to leave that with Mike first because he is our resident fan of mythology.
Would I have wanted the writing to be different? No, I thought the writing was like pretty good. There were some characters that I wish would have been like portrayed a little bit differently. Like Aphrodite is not supposed to be just like pure love, you know what I mean? She's supposed to be like that crazy manic feeling you get when you're in love. You know how you're just like drunk and blind to the world? Like it's supposed to be that kind of like on the edge of crazy. I don't think she came across crazy enough or crazy in love. But yeah, like on the whole, I really like the game and I like the way that all the writing came together. And if you take a step back and think about how difficult it is to do writing for a roguelike, and have it make sense, like holy cow, so difficult.
And maybe this dives, because I didn't watch the entire Noclip documentary. I'm assuming at some point they dive into the dialogue system. I just imagine how many spreadsheets and flowcharts they needed to have to make this work.
Totally.
I have not watched the whole thing either, but yeah, I can only imagine.
Go ahead, Flora.
Well, I wouldn't change anything about the writing, but there is simply too much of it, which is a great problem to have. I feel like every time I reach Hades has some new observation to make about, like, back to the earlier point about the spear, or just every time you do something a little bit different, the game reacts to that and kind of adapts seemingly. And even in the menus, that's just what's narrated. And this is a fully voiced game. There's so much in these little log books and just lore dumps about things as seemingly insignificant as the fish that you pick up. But also, like, as you gradually unlock the relationships with each of the characters, you get little tidbits as well. There is an ungodly amount present here in this game.
I have another question from Spirit Halloween. That first question was from them. And then the second is, do you have any opinions on the 3 romance routes? I know that we talked about 2 of them, but there's a third.
What's the third? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't.
It's got to be Medusa's head. Medusa. It's got to be.
I think you're right. I think it is Medusa.
Right? Yeah.
That's a character we didn't even really talk about.
Yeah, or Dusa, as she's known.
Yeah, well,
Dusa's funny.
I think it's got to be a play on Medusa, maid Dusa. Right? You know what I mean? Like, she's a maid in the house. Maid Dusa. No? No one else?
That didn't click with me for some reason.
Yeah, it
right?
clicked with me. But she was kind.
Well, it's also like Medusa was the person, and then Medusa gets her head chopped off. So you can imagine that the Gorgon like head would just be Dusa. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be the whole thing.
That's even funnier when you spell it out,
you know,
which is a rare occurrence for humor.
But yeah, I did not. I didn't do any of the romancing things. But if it's her, I mean, that feels like the right path.
I want to ask one question that is not in these questions. Do we like the art? Because I think the art is a sublime part of the game by Gen Z that we haven't even talked about yet.
I will say, sorry, after you, Flora.
I was actually initially put off by the art. I didn't like the look of it, the kind of isometric design, but for some strange reason, the longer I was exposed to the game, and there's kind of multiple art styles. There's like the 3D environment and then sort of like 2D art as well. I actually really do like it, and especially in terms of like the musical presentation, which I think fits in the discussion of art. Overall, I think that this is actually a really compelling artistic game.
So in terms of like how the art style looked, didn't immediately grab me. Very similar. And I think it had a lot to do with how they portrayed Poseidon, because that's just not how I think of Poseidon. This Poseidon's just like, you're like cool uncle, but then you grow up and you realize he's a bit of a like slimy douche, you know?
He's water Zeus in this depiction, right?
But that's what he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be watery Zeus. You know, they're pretty much the same type of person, you know, like kind of mercurial, you know, mood changes very quickly, feels like they have complete dominion over everything in front of them.
And this guy just pretty much works at a surf shop. He's going to rent you a scuba suit.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I think once I put the way that they portrayed Poseidon and the way that they portrayed Artemis, like, out of my mind, I was like, oh, I'm so into this. Like, Nyx, amazing. Nyx, that's an amazing way to portray Nyx. Chaos, that's an amazing way to portray chaos. There are just so many good like styles or portrayals of these characters that just absolutely amazing. It puts the one or two that I don't love like way in the distance. Mm-hmm. What about you guys?
I love the art style. At first I was put off just because the amount of red that there was in there. I am, as a person, like not a red is my least favorite color, and if you put red in front of me, it actually like actively repels me, and so I didn't make it out of the first world for the first while.
Really?
And so all I saw was red, and that put me off. But it was only when I got to all of my hometown, red puts me off. But when I got to Elysium, that's the first time where I went, oh, this is like greener and more serene, and it really turned me on from an environmental perspective. There were a couple characters beyond the ones that you shared that I really like too. Dionysus, is that how I say it?
Dionysus.
Dionysus.
Also, this
Dionysus
is a PG podcast.
Like,
I don't want to know what you're turned on by.
Dionysus?
No, you sorry, you meant never mind.
Give me that context. Give me the context for that.
You earlier said I went to this green area and it really turned me on. So, anyway, Dionysus was like a drunk frat boy with his purple juice, and that really was a great portrayal. I enjoyed that a lot. I think he's also one of the best, like most accurately portrayed. Like he is supposed to be just a party, like he is Mardi Gras, Bacchus.
So that's our thoughts on Hades. We've gone for a while here, but let's wrap it up with some final thoughts about this video game. Let's start with Mo.
Totally. So Hades is, I think, I've been thinking about it throughout this whole podcast and this recording. It's my favorite game on Switch that I've played, and I think I'm not even going to hesitate. Whereas before I was kind of wondering, like Breath of the Wild, whatever. No, this is great. The art style I love, the music I love, the writing I loved, the like progression of like difficulty, like it's not too hard, and once it gets hard, you like eventually, just like Mike said, you get better, not the game gets harder. Nothing is really like spelled out for you, like, hey, go look at this mirror, go upgrade. You kind of have to explore, and you directly see the like fruits of your labor after like exploring and trying on new things. Best pickup game to play while traveling for me, and I'd recommend it to anyone who says I'm buying a Switch. I'm like, this is an instant buy, like before Breath of the Wild for me.
Oh wow.
I would say you know me. I'm a glutton for punishment. I like hard games, but I do feel like this game leans a bit too much on the upgrades that you find as you play that end up passively making you stronger, run by run, as you accumulate more darkness. So that was, a little bit of a turnoff, because I just felt like at the end of the day, it required me to just put more runs in more than it required me to get better at this, this combo or learning the right boons to push together. But on the whole, like, I love this game so much. Like, it's so good. Like, that one little gripe does not overwhelm all of the amazing things in this game, and I'm so glad that we decided to play this.
I'm with you that this, if I were to make a list of games of my life, this would be in the top 20 for sure. It is a fantastic video game. It is on Game Pass. If you have an Xbox, you have no excuse. You get those 4K art assets that just make it pop. The frame rate's fantastic. Music's wonderful. The story, we didn't even like really dive into it, but there are layers to the story as well that you just like get as you keep going. But beyond that, for me, it's just a game that like it feels so great to play. As you dash around the map, use the different weapons, figure out what boons are best for you. It's just so fun. And it is a game that I cannot recommend enough if you like, even like high level, if you like action titles. I can't recommend Hades enough. It's a fantastic video game that you should not miss.
Totally. And I'm a casual too, and I would never play roguelikes, and this became my favorite game. So that's another incentive for...
Sorry, is this your favorite game?
Switch. Yeah,
okay,
I have some nostalgic series that are there just for pure nostalgia. But yeah, recent memory and Switch game, my favorite game.
Flora.
There's a tendency in video games discourse to kind of get swept up by the hype and play what's recently being discussed and what's getting nominated at the Game of the Year awards, and I tend to not really align with that conversation. I try to resist chasing those, currently popular examples. So I missed the initial hype wave of Hades, and somehow just this idea stuck around in my head. Why is this getting 9s and 10s out of just across the board, and people won't shut up about this game? And kind of similar to the rest of you, or at least with Mo in particular, I wasn't one who sought out roguelikes, but I bought the game and I have been sucked in for the better part of a year, just playing Hades every now and then. Every few weeks I boot it up and play a few runs. I play it with friends. We kind of have an informal race that we do where we sit in a call together and we both boot up Hades, and you choose my weapons and my keepsakes, and then we match heat levels, and then we just see who can clear it faster. It's just a great game to casually play, put on, and it's a game I see myself returning to for probably another few dozen hours over the next few months, years, etc.
That's a fun idea of getting together with folks and maybe even streaming it on Twitch where you're watching it in party mode or in squad mode, and see who beats a run first.
Yeah, the best part is the banter back and forth. I just got this hammer upgrade. Yeah. Which one should I use? And someone's like, I used that one. It's trash. Do not pick it. And the other person will be like, no, you gotta use it. It's great playing with someone, and I can vouch for that too because I did a little bit of that in my first couple runs.
Well, hey, those are our very positive thoughts about a very good video game by Supergiant Games. It's Hades. Flora, thank you so much for coming on for the third time to the show. If folks want to find you and your wonderful taste in games, where can they do that?
Thank you. And twitter.com/ludonarrativefm would be the go-to place to interact with me and see that list of games. I think I'm about 50 games that I've cleared this year. Some of those are as short as 30 minutes. Some of them are as long as, 100 hours. But I just like to keep that organization there. And then, of course, my work is found at epiloguegaming.com. And let me say this. If you try out Hades and you don't like it, here's a parachute for you. One of our writers on the website recently published an article called Why I Quit Playing Hades. And so if you don't click with the experience and you kind of want some group therapy, head over to epiloguegaming.com and you can check that out.
I will include that as a link in the show notes.
Thank you.
And that article is by...
Barry Irick, one of our writers.
By Barry Irick. Barry Irick's been doing a lot of work on the website lately. So
yes.
There you go. We'll link that in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on the show again. We love having you, and you will be back.
Awesome. It's always a pleasure, and thank you again.
We will drag you kicking, screaming. You can find all things Left Behind Game Club at Left Behind Club on Twitter, at Left Behind Game Club on Instagram, on Discord at leftbehindgame.club/Discord. Do us two favors if you enjoyed the show. Send it to a friend and give us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice because it helps a lot. Michael, where can the wonderful listeners find you on the internet?
The fine folks can find me at RuffaloM on most places online or michaelruffalo.com. Mo, where can the people find you?
You can find me on social media platforms at mmertati, and also in our Discord server chatting up with all the fine folks.
You can find me on the internet at Jacob McCord on all major social media platforms. I host another podcast called Cutscenes. It's a video game movie podcast that comes out seasonally. As you are listening to this, we are releasing our third season. We have 5 episodes to go. We're watching Final Fantasy Spirits Within, which is an interesting movie. We're watching the King of Kong documentary. Just some wonderful movies. So check that out on all major podcasting platforms. And that's all for me. So without further ado, Michael, take us home, please.
And that, my friends, is one less game left behind.
Hey, I'm Jacob McCord.
I'm Katie Lesbrance.
And I'm Travis Colnut.
We are hosting a brand new podcast called Cutscenes.
There are tons of video game podcasts and tons of TV film podcasts, but we're going to bring you the intersection of both and talk about video game, movies, and TV.
I know what you're thinking. Aren't most of them not very good? Wrong. Some of them are fine. And we're going to tell you all about them.
Make sure to subscribe on your podcasting platform of choice. Follow us on Twitter at cutscenes_pod. And most importantly, give us a listen.
See you soon.
Cutscenes, a video game movie podcast.